Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I think we're going to go ahead and get kicked off here. Sean, you want to unmute and start your video?
All right. Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully you can all hear me. Just getting a confirmation, Emily.
You sound great, Sean.
Awesome, thank you. Well, welcome everyone who's joining us here today for the NextGen Geo Event. We're really glad that you're here, and we really can't wait to get started for what is an exciting afternoon and agenda. My name is Sean Porce. I am the lead analyst for the U.S. Department of Energy's Geothermal Technologies Office, or GTO for short. And I'm also the lead for the Geothermal Manufacturing Prize. I will be serving as your humble MC for today's event, and really appreciate you taking some time here to be with us today, and look forward to sort of the conversation that we're about to have. A few things to consider before we kick things off. For those in the audience, please ensure that your mics are muted and that your video is off to help us save bandwidth. We potentially have over 450 folks joining us today, so the bandwidth saving will be of the utmost importance, so appreciate your cooperation. If you do have a question during the event, please type it into the chat, keeping in mind that this is a public chat. We do have NREL staff minding the chat feature, and in addition to others, so we'll aim to answer your questions as best as we can as we proceed through our agenda. A recording of this presentation is going to be made available following the event. And if we don't get to your questions today, or if you have a question after the event, please find us at this afternoon's industry outreach event, or you can also email us at challenges@nrel.gov. And now just to dive into the exciting agenda we have, we're going to hear from some distinguished clean energy thought leaders who are actively working and diving into the geothermal space right now: Jamie Beard, Tim Latimer, as well as Alex Grant. We also have 3 exciting competition-related announcements from the Geothermal Collegiate Competition, the Geothermal Manufacturing Prize, and a new prize that we'll be unveiling today. And then we're really honored to have Kelly Speaks-Backman, the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary and Acting Assistant Secretary for Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, who will join us to discuss the Biden administration's Clean Energy Plan, how geothermal fits into this clean energy transition, as well as the importance of incorporating JEDI principles, those being justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, into all facets of the great work we do here at DOE. To wrap up our event, we will have 2 options to facilitate connections, as well as learn more about the geothermal community: a student-focused career panel, as well as an industry networking event. We're going to have more information about those breakouts at the end of the main session. But without further ado, I'd like to actually take the opportunity to introduce the director of the Geothermal Technologies Office, Dr. Susan Ham, who will be providing some opening remarks. So Sue, please take it away.
Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. Sean, can you give me a thumbs up that you can hear me? If you can hear me. Okay, excellent.
Yep.
So it is awesome to be here today. I'm so excited. I hope you guys are all as excited as we are. It's great to be with you here today. I promise to keep my opening comments brief. I'm very excited about today's lineup. We have announcements, we have new prizes, like this is so exciting. Okay, so our nation is charting a course toward a net zero carbon emissions by 2050. And the Biden-Harris administration is 100% committed to building a resilient, environmentally just, green economy powered by millions of well-paying jobs. I'd love to dive in with the details on this, but I'm going to defer all that conversation to a little bit later with our Acting Assistant Secretary, Kelly Speaks-Backman, who's going to talk about jobs and about equity. And she's really going to be able to really dive into today's $2 trillion infrastructure jobs bill that was just dropped in Congress. So jobs, that is the key word for today's discussions. Workforce development is what brought many of you here. The geothermal community is seeking new leaders from diverse fields to help fulfill the industry's potential in revitalizing America's energy and manufacturing sectors. Geologists, geophysicists, and drillers are probably the first roles that most of us think of, but there are many other roles to fill: machine learning, seismic interpretation, public policy, marketing, business operations, site operations, material engineering. The whole list just goes on and on and on. And I must point out the crucial role of innovators and entrepreneurs. Geothermal isn't on an island. It's connected to mining and oil and gas, high-tech manufacturing, you name it. It's connected to other renewables. As a baseload source of power always on, geothermal is an ideal fit for energy portfolios that include intermittent sources like solar and wind. Opportunities will abound for those creating new value streams, new efficiencies, new synergies, and integrated solutions. These are truly exciting and opportunistic times for renewable energy, particularly geothermal. With the support of the new administration, geothermal has become a more desirable energy source than ever before. After many years of quote unquote flying under the radar, we're seeing geothermal innovation take center stage. We're seeing it in media, we're seeing it all over the place. In fact, I'm now referring to it, and I hope you all will join me, as America's next renewable powerhouse. Of course, I'm a bit biased, but I'm sure that many of you in the audience are as well. In addition to new workforce opportunities, we're also looking at a wealth of R&D opportunities in the coming year. GTO's budget has doubled over just the past several years, and with continued congressional support, we're looking at the prospect of even greater R&D funding next year, years to come. We'll see what happens, but we are super optimistic about it. For those unfamiliar with the Geothermal Technologies Office, we manage R&D initiatives in 3 program areas: enhanced geothermal systems, hydrothermal and low temperature resources, and data modeling and analysis. We launch new R&D initiatives yearly in each of these programs. In terms of planning, we look foremost at what research, development, and demonstration work can have the strongest impact on advancing geothermal as part of the national energy mix. We're motivated to get to a carbon-free grid by 2035 and a carbon-free energy sector by 2050, while ensuring that the benefits of this revolution accrue to all Americans. We know that all of you are as well. So if you're thinking to yourself, well, gosh, this sounds great, I'm not even sure where to start, we got to wait for you. So there are great ways to get started. You can serve as a merit reviewer, helping to analyze potential R&D projects while learning the ins and outs of federal funding and what goes into a successful application. If you're in industry, whether a small business or larger, we sponsor innovation-based competitions with cash rewards to help motivate new thinking and new solutions. Entrepreneurs can explore the DOE's SBIR and STTR programs. These fund a wide portfolio of startups and small businesses to stimulate technology innovation and increase R&D commercialization. For students, you can look into fellowships and internships. Fellows and interns can be found within all the DOE's renewable power offices, as well as the 17 DOE laboratories. Or you can get involved with our collegiate competitions, which offer student teams cash prizes and a great opportunity to make an impact in R&D planning. I promise to keep it brief, so let me wrap up by saying a big thank you to the great team at NREL for pulling this event together. Also, thanks for today's panelists, and to each of you for being here. The door to GTO is always open. If you are interested in serving as a merit reviewer or have questions about the work we do, please contact us at the email shown here, doe.geothermal@ee.doe.gov. And with that, I will turn this back to Sean. Thank you all so much. Looking forward to today.
Perfect. Thank you, Sue. Thanks for the insights, and +1 to the merit review. We look forward to seeing some of you on some future panels. And we look forward to also hearing from you, Sue, here in a bit regarding Kelly Speaks Back Then. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our first clean energy thought leader, Jamie Beard, who is the Executive Director of the Geothermal Entrepreneurship Organization at the University of Texas at Austin. So Jamie, over to you.
Hey, everybody. Sean, can you hear me okay? You got my audio?
Mm-hmm. Yes, awesome. Loud and clear.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks, DOE, for having me today. And thanks to everybody for organizing. It's great to be here. So let me tell you who I am and what I do, and then what gets me really excited about geothermal. So I run an organization. It's actually a GTO-funded organization at the University of Texas at Austin called the Geothermal Entrepreneurship Organization, or GEO for short. The purpose of GEO is to get a lot of noise going on in the oil and gas industry about the geothermal opportunity and what that means for the oil and gas workforce, for oil and gas technology transfer, and for the future of geothermal. And when I say geothermal, my particular interest in geothermal is the concept of geothermal anywhere. So being able to drill for geothermal energy in the near term, anywhere in the world. So GEO is located in Austin, Texas, and we do a couple of things. The first of them, reaching out to oil and gas entities, oil and gas experts, oil and gas career long veterans, and getting them excited about the problem set associated with being able to drill efficiently, cheaply, quickly for geothermal. And so that has actually, over the past year, been a really exciting and fast moving train, because oil and gas, there's a moment right now in oil and gas where there is just a lot of energy and excitement for this. So it's been a fun year in that regard. Another one of Geo's major goals is to support a new cohort of startup companies, right? So you get a lot of exciting innovation coming out of the oil patch in terms of technology transfer and new concepts for geothermal. And what do you do with that, right? So, well, an obvious answer to it is have a bunch of people start companies and get them out in the field working on these problems. And so that's what Geo does. We've had some really cool companies that have started working on geothermal that are brand new. Many are led by oil and gas veterans, but many are not. And I'll talk about that in terms of engaging all sorts of disciplines in geothermal a little bit later. But so the startup aspect and the entrepreneurial aspect of Geo is really fun, and we've had a really awesome outcome in terms of oil and gas folks from Texas, but also globally engaging in this problem set. And finally, Geo runs Pivot, the Pivot Conference Series. So the Pivot Hydrocarbons to Heat Conference Series. It's meant to be a decade-long conference, so spanning the geothermal decade. It kicked off in 2020. Pivot 2021 will be at the end of July, and 4 times bigger than it was last year. It's intended to bring together geothermal industry folks with oil and gas industry folks in a way that is engaging and a little controversial, and really getting some thoughts on the table about where we can go and how big we can get this to be, and how fast. So I wanted to share today kind of the foundational thoughts I had when I founded Geo, and what, how we pull in the oil and gas industry, and then what that can mean for geothermal globally, right? Because it's a gigantic opportunity. And so Geo is, of course, through a Texas lens, because the epicenter of Geo is Texas. But really geothermal, and particularly the concept of geothermal anywhere, is a very global concept, right? So we crack the nut on being able to drill for geothermal anywhere, and all of a sudden we have a global ubiquitous clean energy source that can be located near population centers or wherever we need it. And oh, by the way, it's base load, and it's a small footprint, right? So there are all of these really interesting and exciting aspects about geothermal. But the one that excites me the most is the prospect of going really, really fast and getting to global scale really quickly. So, 2050 climate targets, no problem. And how would that be? Well, it's by leveraging an already existing globally scaled and globally present industry with highly skilled workers with perfect skills overlaps, right? So that's the oil and gas industry. If you back out 30,000 feet and take a look at the geothermal industry and the oil and gas industry, it is essentially the same business. There is very little difference. They both characterize and explore for an energy asset that's in the subsurface. They drill for an energy asset that's in the subsurface, and they produce an energy asset that's in the subsurface. The only difference is a pivot from, hydrocarbons to heat, right? And when you look at the problem that way, there is so much overlap in terms of not only workforce and skills and methodologies and capabilities, but also existing industry assets like oil and gas rigs, right? Things that we already have ready to go that we could deploy now to start producing clean energy projects. Not to mention the enormous opportunity for technology transfer and skills transfer, right? So, and so that concept is what really, really excites me about geothermal, because I literally view the oil and gas industry as, a gassed up Ferrari in the driveway, ready to go in terms of helping develop new geothermal energy concepts and develop new geothermal energy projects globally. And so, if we were able to leverage the oil and gas industry in the right way and really get our eye on the ball, geothermal will hit an exponential curve, just like shale did, right? And all of a sudden we remake the world in terms of reaching carbon neutrality commitments and climate goals. So that's what gets me really excited about geothermal. And I'm really, really focused on engaging oil and gas brains in the concepts through geo. I don't want to repeat Sue's comments about how to engage, because they were really good. The GTO is doing a great job at getting opportunities out there for folks to engage and to get their ideas funded. So the competitions that we'll talk about today later on in the program are a really good example. And also, of course, there's more funding coming down the pike for R&D. But I did want to mention also that there are some new and developing opportunities as well within industry associations for folks to engage. So I know this is a really broad audience today, and so I really have to speak to everybody for this to be relevant to most. But you know, students, of course, the competitions. For oil and gas folks that are on the call today, nearly all of the oil and gas industry associations now have geothermal working groups and are planning geothermal technical conferences and road mapping exercises. And that goes for SPE and AAPG and everything in between. And it's really, really exciting. This stuff has happened literally within the last few months. And actually Pivot this year is going to be co-hosted by, you know, 10 oil and gas industry associations. So just really exciting. There's a whole lot of engagement. So I would encourage folks to join some of these groups from the industry associations that you are members of. There's also other geothermal conferences like the World Geothermal Congress that's ongoing now. So find ways to engage and listen and share your ideas and thoughts. And that's how we get there. Okay, so my time is just about up. I just want to say that and I mean this truly. I feel like it is absolutely not an overstatement that if we are, you know, together, oil and gas and geothermal, able to solve some very incremental and relatively small technology challenges associated with drilling for geothermal energy anywhere in the world, if we solve them together in the coming years, we literally solve energy. And there is not another clean energy source that can say that, right? I mean, it's one of these silver bullets that seems so elusive, but that geothermal truly could fit that bill, right? Could be doable anywhere in the world if we just focus on a small set of incremental challenges together. And so, you know, let's do that. Everybody, let's get together and really, really hit hard. The geothermal decade, we got, you know, we're 2 years into it. So let's go 8 years. Let's make it happen. And okay. So anyway, all right, that's it. That's it for me. My time is up. I will see you guys along the path the next couple of years. And I will hand it back over to you, Sean. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Jamie. As always, an electrifying speaker. So thank you for sharing your experiences with Geo, as well as your thoughts on how to bridge that technology and workforce opportunity between oil and gas, between geothermal. Also look forward to taking that metaphorical Ferrari out for a spin at some point. So let's continue that conversation too. Thank you again, Jamie. So now we're really excited though to make our first big announcement of the day. The finalist teams for the Geothermal Collegiate Competition. To make the announcement, I'll invite my colleague Elizabeth Metcalf, who is the Stakeholder Engagement Lead here at the Geothermal Technologies Office, as well as the lead for the Geothermal Collegiate Competition, to join me here on the virtual stage in order to make the announcement. So Elizabeth, please.
Hi, Sean, can you hear me okay?
I can, yep.
Awesome. So thanks, Sean. I'm excited to announce the Geothermal Collegiate Competition finalist teams today, as Sean mentioned. The Geothermal Collegiate Competition engages students to develop innovative geothermal energy applications and gain real-world career skills as they prepare to enter the clean energy workforce. The challenge fosters understanding of geothermal energy, communicates the benefits of geothermal technologies, and helps overcome non-technical barriers to geothermal development. The spring 2021 round of the competition is engaging teams to design direct use concepts leveraging geothermal energy to heat and cool buildings, campuses, districts, or entire communities. Students gain real-world renewable energy industry experience, conceiving a use case, performing a resource assessment, and usage evaluation and planning alongside community stakeholders. Teams are competing for cash prizes for first, second, and third place, as well as for honorable mentions for outstanding geosciences and stakeholder engagement components. And today we're announcing 15 finalist teams representing 17 collegiate institutions, including 3 minority serving institutions. They've submitted 7 different types of district energy load applications, including 3 which convert existing oil and gas wells to geothermal. That's pretty neat. Now, please join me in congratulating the following geothermal collegiate competition finalists. I believe they're up on the screen. Thank you. All teams are from US-based collegiate institutions and hailing from 10 different states. They represent a variety of collegiate institutions, which is always great, including 11 public 4-year colleges, 3 private 4-year colleges, and 2 community colleges. The finalists also represent a great variety in terms of the district applications that they proposed, including college campuses, elementary schools, farm, medical center, and mixed-use development, multifamily housing, and 1 located on a Native American reservation. Congratulations to these teams, and good luck in the last leg of the competition. I look forward to seeing and hearing from some of these finalists today, hopefully on the geothermal industry career panel beginning at 2:30 Eastern, which I am lucky enough to be moderating with our speakers today. So I think that wraps it up for me. Thank you, Sean. Over to you.
Great. Thanks, Elizabeth. And yes, following up on Elizabeth's congrats, really look forward to sort of the great work that these finalist teams are going to undertake. We're now going to hand things over to our second clean energy thought leader here this afternoon, Tim Latimer. Tim is the CEO at Fervo Energy and recently highlighted in Forbes' prestigious 30 under 30 in energy list. At Fervo, Tim is a next generation geothermal developer, and he and his team are seeking to dramatically increase the productivity and lifetime of geothermal wells using innovative technologies. So Tim, please take us away.
Thanks, Sean, and really excited to be here. And just want to say it's always fun to speak after a big announcement. Congratulations to all of the college finalists there. It's very exciting. Good to see such a great cross-section of people supporting geothermal advancement, and also exciting to speak after Jamie, who always gets me even more fired up about geothermal than I already am, which is fantastic, and really appreciate this event today. I am going to show slides in a little bit, but just wanted to talk, introduce myself and give a little bit of background. I think a lot like Jamie was talking about in terms of harnessing skills from the oil and gas industry and this cross-industry collaboration, that's something that really appeals to me. I started my career working as a drilling engineer in the oil and gas industry and was drilling wells, all over South Texas and West Texas, based out of Houston, before I got really excited about geothermal. And I'd say there's really 2 things that appealed to me about geothermal. The first was, being a resident in Texas at the time, living in Houston, we kept seeing all the impacts of climate change just becoming more and more to the forefront with flooding, and then most recently with this extreme winter weather event we've had here in Texas. And so I got to a point in my career where I got very passionate about climate change and wanted to find a new way to address it. And the second was that I've seen now what these oil and gas downturns could do to the communities that I work in, and the places that my friends and family can be economically devastated by this. And I wanted to make sure that we were creating an opportunity for people to picture themselves in the clean energy future and work on a sustainable, innovative resource that can really tap into the skill sets of the oil and gas industry, because it's very important that we have this clean energy transition, because climate is such an urgent challenge, but that we're also not leaving people behind as we do it. And so I quit my job in 2015 working in oil and gas and decided to devote my career to geothermal because I saw it as a way to accomplish these objectives as being one of the missing pieces of climate change and elsewhere. And I moved out to Stanford. I did a lot of work with the Stanford Geothermal Research Program, and fortunately found collaborators and researchers there that helped me launch Fervo Energy. And it's been quite a journey in the world of geothermal innovation. And I'm going to talk about this in my slides in a second, and just want to highlight how different it feels right now to be in this sector. The amount of momentum and funding and technology advancement in geothermal is unlike anything that we've experienced. We founded Fervo Energy in 2017, and I can't tell you at the time how many odd looks and sort of disbelief and almost condescending pats on my head I got for telling people that I wanted to drive innovation in the geothermal sector. And fortunately, we found folks like the Activate program at the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab and Breakthrough Energy Ventures, a $1 billion clean energy VC fund set up by Bill Gates and others to tackle big problems in climate change, that were willing to take a bet on us and back us as we drove this forward. And so we've been working years now on geothermal innovation, but it's a night and day difference from 2017 when we started the company to today, and how passionate people are about geothermal. People recognize its huge potential now. There's investment coming into the sector. And I think events like this are just really capturing that momentum. So I just want to compliment the folks here at the Department of Energy for putting this on and really shepherding this industry through to a time where we're really well poised for a breakout like Jamie has talked about. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and kind of underline some of the trends that we've seen here that really have brought about this enthusiasm and dive into it here. So give me 1 second to get this pulled up. Okay. Just confirmation that people can see my screen. Is that working all right?
Looks great, Tim.
Great. Thanks, everyone. So just highlighting a few of the things that we're seeing that are making this what we're calling the geothermal decade, or I really liked how it was put earlier by Sue as the America's next renewable energy powerhouse. I think that's becoming very, very real, and it's approaching every single day. But it really starts with this. In the current administration's announcement and the Department of Energy leadership's efforts today on new infrastructure and clean infrastructure and reinvigorated investment in clean power is just a perfect example where all across the world is taking aggressive action on climate change. Technology has driven the cost of renewables much lower. It's much more realistic to put them on the grid now than it was even a few years ago. Decarbonization policy has moved away from kind of these easy low-level targets to actually thinking about economy-wide 100% clean energy targets. And that's very important for geothermal because that's where our reliability and 24/7 attributes really shine, and new entrants are buying clean energy directly. Now private corporations are starting to lead on doing catalytic procurement of new technologies and energy resources in a way that's benefiting geothermal. Anybody who's followed the space knows that there's been quite a bit of difference in the last decade on the way we generate our electricity. So solar, of course, has been a tremendous success story and rapidly driving the cost down. Wind energy has been another success story and rapidly driving the cost down. But the one that people may be a little bit less familiar with, but is highly relevant to this conversation, is drilling productivity has gotten tremendously better over the last decade. The EIA tracks a metric called the Drilling Productivity Index that they use to measure oil and gas across different basins in the US. And across all of them, we're about 10 times more productive at drilling than we were just a decade ago. And that has really profound implications. To date, what that's mostly meant is we have record low natural gas prices and have for quite some time. But one of the things that's exciting and kind of a focus of our company and the sector writ large here in geothermal is it presents many opportunities for us to repurpose those innovations and technologies to drive a step change in geothermal performance and make it much more realistic to adopt technologies in this sector. There's also a ton of policy tailwinds that are really pushing this forward. Obviously things like the announcement today from the administration around new investment in clean infrastructure across the country. But at the state level, there's a lot of things that are driving policy too. So a few years ago, kind of the most ambitious renewable energy climate policy was talking about trying to achieve something like 25 to 33% electricity from carbon-free sources. But now there's 8 different states, and I have to update this slide all the time because every day that goes by, there's a new state that sets a target that have thought about actually 100% clean electricity. So not just a little bit of their electricity, but the entire grid coming from clean electricity. And what's great is that a lot of states that have adopted these targets, like Hawaii, like New Mexico, like Nevada, are ones that are geothermal hotspots where we already have production and the opportunity to expand quite quickly. So geothermal is going to be a key part of the mix and is benefiting a lot from this renewed focus on deep decarbonization. There's also far more opportunities in the private sector than have ever been around before. So Going back 20 years ago, private corporations started getting serious about climate change and developing policies to address it. And probably the earliest thing to do, the easiest thing to do, was to buy carbon offsets. So at first, renewable energy or other clean forms of power were too expensive for these groups. They just kept producing power the way that they used to, but just bought carbon offsets. And that was kind of the earliest stage of maturity on corporations addressing climate. Now you have 100% renewable energy, which really scaled throughout the 2010s. Google was the first company to adopt a target here, but there's now well over 100 private corporations that have 100% renewable energy target that are focused on buying renewable energy. But at the end of the day, this has been important for catalyzing, new wind and solar resources, but it's not a true load matched product. What these companies do is they buy renewable energy around the world. They add up how much they've used at the end of the year, and they add up how much they've bought from a renewable energy standpoint. And from an accounting standpoint, if those two numbers match at the end of the year, that's considered 100% renewable energy. But of course, electrons don't care about that. And oftentimes these groups are over procuring renewable energy during sometimes, using fossil fuels at other times, and just kind of offsetting it that way. But it was a great thing to kind of drive innovation for the last decade. But now we're very fortunate that private industry and other groups have adopted even more ambitious goals. So the new kind of gold standard for climate action for power purchasers is 24/7 carbon-free energy. So for the first time, groups like Google and groups like Los Angeles through LADWP are contemplating actually having energy that matches their load profile 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, which is an entirely different problem than the accounting exercise that's done for 100% renewable energy. And this is quite exciting, and it's a big boost for geothermal. One thing I can highlight, just last week, LA came out with what they call the LA 100 report. And it showed that this is actually very achievable by 2035 or perhaps even sooner to do, but it relies on a large expansion of geothermal in most situations. In some scenarios, it had the use of geothermal in LA expanded by 5 to 10 times over what it is today in order to meet all the hours of the year for renewable energy. So these trends on moving towards 24/7 carbon-free energy have been a big boost for the geothermal sector. And again, study after study, like this LA 100 study, has shown that wind and solar, along with batteries, are very important parts of this puzzle. They're going to carry us a long way there, but we need, at the end of the day, a resource to complement them that works 24/7. And I think this is what Jamie's getting at when she says that this is an energy problem that, when solves energy. And that's what's quite exciting about it, because solar and wind have already done so much heavy lifting. They've carried us, half or 2/3 of the way there. We just need one big resource to come through, be cost effective, be reliable, and be 24/7 in order to complement them. Because once you get past 60 to 80% wind and solar, the costs start going up dramatically, and it's very difficult to achieve it with just wind and solar. So that's why there's a need for geothermal, and it's very important for us to continue pushing forward with this, and will have profound implications if we're successful in developing it. So buyers want carbon-free energy 24/7. This is what geothermal delivers. It's always on, it's carbon-free, it can be dispatchable to play nice with others, ramp up and down as needed. It can be relatively inexpensive, especially if we continue pushing the technology forward through innovations like this forum today. It can be fast to build, and it's modular and scalable. There's geothermal resources down to a few hundred kilowatts, all the way up to over 1,000 megawatts, like the geysers in Northern California. So it can be really very fit for purpose when it's needed, and has a lot of attractive attributes. These trends, the policy, the technology, the renewed interest in climate change, the corporate action, have really driven a renaissance already in geothermal that the industry is starting to capitalize on. There have been 8 new power purchase agreements signed in the last year alone for geothermal. That's in contrast to just 1 over the past 3 years combined, because these things like SB 100 and the deep decarbonization targets and new technology innovation continue driving this forward. And I've got a quote here from one of the community choice aggregators in California, who highlights the need for geothermal, Silicon Valley Clean Energy, one of the groups that did one of these major contracts last year. And they said that, geothermal does tend to be more expensive than solar, but whenever you look at the full value proposition, not just cost, it's an important resource to have on the grid. And so more and more groups are continuing to buy this resource. And we're getting unprecedented levels of support. Like I said, the enthusiasm in this sector is unlike anything I've ever experienced before, and it's very exciting. There's innovations led by the Geothermal Technology Office, in particular with the Utah Forge Project, where they just continue to break drilling records and drive new techniques. A lot of the things that we've been talking about actually out into the field and prove that they work. The California Energy Commission is focusing on doing lithium extraction from geothermal, which is going to add another valuable resource of domestic lithium production for our electric vehicle revolution. The Public Utility Commission is working on enacting a 1,000 megawatt geothermal mandate by 2026 to help meet the grid reliability needs of California. And the provisions of the Agile Act passed in the 2020 Omnibus Bill, which gave much renewed funding to geothermal, supported these critical mineral efforts around lithium, and supported commercialization efforts of technologies around forge. So the time is certainly now to address this. And much like Jamie said, there's new partners in the sector that are coming in with renewed interest. So everything from the innovation and research and entrepreneurship side, like Jamie's organization Geo, to Breakthrough Energy Ventures, to the Activator organization RPE, are putting new resources into geothermal innovation. And we're finding a lot of willing partners in oil and gas companies that are trying to chart their new course in the energy transition, from Schlumberger to Shell to Chevron to Baker Hughes. These organizations that have been around, become experts in drilling over the last 150 years, are now applying that quite rigorously to the geothermal sector. So the 2020s will be the decade of geothermal, and we've got to do a few things to seize the moment. Making climate change front and center, I think, is very important. We are a carbon-free resource. The reason to really invest in geothermal is it can be that final solution to addressing deep decarbonization of climate. And we've got to talk about that all the time. We have to relentlessly tell our story. You know, frequently geothermal can be referred to as the forgotten renewable. In the past, we've just been left out of bills, tax incentives. And we need to do a better job of telling our story, talking about that employment for oil and gas workers in communities all over the country, talking about the unique role that geothermal can play so that we continue to get support. And finally, we have to drive technologies the customer wants, that customers want. We need to be consistent, we need to be flexible, and we need to incorporate mineral extraction. These are very important. I'm very excited about this American-made challenge because I think it highlights this third point really well, and there's technologies across the spectrum that are getting there. I think it's very important to remember that there's no one solution that's going to solve all of geothermal. You know, it's a systems problem. We have to deal with drilling. We have to deal with production. We have to deal with well completion. We have to deal with surface facilities. We have to deal with all these new geoscience techniques and data science techniques. And so I'm really thrilled to see kind of the cross section of groups that have been in this competition so far that are addressing every little bit of these challenges. And it's only going to be through collaboration across the public and private sector, collaboration with the oil and gas industry and other stakeholders, and finding solutions for the entire value chain, from exploration to drilling to production to power production, that we're going to be successful. But there's so much momentum here that I know we can do it. So that's why we're so excited about geothermal. That's why we do think this is the decade for geothermal, and it's going to play such an important role in addressing climate change for our country and beyond. And we're just thrilled to do it. So that's my talk. Thank you for your time. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sean, so that I know everybody's been very anxious to learn who's going to win the next phase of the American-made Geothermal Manufacturing Prize. So it's my pleasure to hand the mic back over to Sean, the Program Manager and Geothermal Manufacturing Prize Lead at the U.S. Department of Energy Geothermal Technology Office, to make this exciting announcement. So Sean, the floor is yours.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks, Tim. And well, first, thanks for your thoughts. They're always really inspiring, and having both you and Jamie sort of echo the opportunity we have really shows what we can do in the next decade. So really excited about your comments, especially about where we are now and where we can go. And also thank you for handing the mic back to me. I'm doing double duty here today, so I'm the MC as well as excited to really announce the American-made Geothermal Manufacturing Prize semifinalists. For those of you who aren't familiar with the program, the Geothermal Manufacturing Prize is a $4.65 million competition designed to spur innovation and address manufacturing challenges fundamental to operating in harsh geothermal environments. Participants compete in 4 escalating contests. They earn money along the way for their innovations during each stage. And in October of 2020, we announced 15 ready contest quarterfinalist teams that were selected for their proposed additive manufacturing focused solutions that can really help overcome some of geothermal's toughest operational challenges. And in February, participants completed their set submissions, aiming to show that they had substantially advanced their technology by demonstrating their design's promise in meeting the engineering and operational requirements of geothermal. And so today, we're really excited that we're announcing our 10 semi-finalist teams. Each of these teams will win $100,000 in cash prizes, as well as $75,000 that can be put towards technical support at DOE, Department of Energy National Laboratories, as well as companies and organizations through the American Made Network. These teams will ultimately go on and can compete in the MAKE contest in order to prototype their designs. Just as a comment before we make this announcement, we're really thrilled with the diversity of these teams, as well as the technologies that they are proposing and are ultimately making up in our set winners. And if we go to the next slide, we're excited to announce in 3 major technology areas our winners. Within the drilling space, we have 3 semi-finalist teams. We have Team AC from Cambridge, Massachusetts. We have the Bit Guys from Morgantown, West Virginia. And we have Team Ozark Integrated Circuits from Fayetteville, Arkansas. In our zone isolation technology category, we have Team Baker Hughes from Houston, Texas. We have Team Downhole Emerging Technologies from Houston, Texas. We have Team Schlumberger, or Huilan 2's team, also from Houston, Texas. And finally, and last but not least, we have Team Welltech from Katy, Texas. So obviously a very strong contingent from Texas in our zone isolation technology category. And then finally, in logging and production focused tools, we have Team Multiscale Systems from Worcester, Massachusetts. We have Team Plugs from Morgantown, West Virginia. And then finally, last but not least, we have Team Ultra High Temperature Logging Tool from Houston, Texas. So let's give a virtual round of applause and congratulations to these 10 teams, and best of luck as they proceed into MAKE and look to design and build their prototypes over the coming months. You can learn more about the technologies that each team has submitted by sticking around for the networking event starting at 2:30 p.m. Eastern. We really do thank everybody who has participated in SET as well as in READY. And if you weren't selected as a semifinalist, please stay tuned because you won't want to miss the launch of a brand new geothermal prize. But before we get to that, I'd first like to introduce our first speaker, our next speaker actually, Alex Grant, who is also a Forbes 30 Under 30 in Energy honoree and a principal at Jade Cove Partners. At Jade Cove, Alex works with project developers, with investors, governments, technology companies, and other stakeholders to evaluate the technical feasibility, the environmental impacts, and economic potential of new projects and technologies in the materials, mining, renewable energy, and water industries. So really, not a lot of work and not a lot of focus. A very, very, very small amount of work, it seems like, Alex. But look forward to hearing your thoughts here, and thank you for joining us today. I'll turn the floor over to you.
Beautiful. Thanks, Sean. Well, let me share my screen here. Does that look good, Sean, or is that right? There we go. I'm the worst young people. I don't know how to use. I'm a bad millennial. I'm figuring this out somehow. Well, cool. Well, thanks so much for having me here. It's a real pleasure. I remember, I guess about 9 months ago, we were talking about lithium with the GTO or the Advanced Manufacturing Office as well. So it's good to kind of continue that conversation and take it to the next level, I guess. I am not from the geothermal energy industry proper. I got into geothermal to some extent via lithium, and I'll talk a bit about my story in a second. But I think what Jamie and Tim said were awesome. Tim, I think I might be your like evil stepbrother or something. I feel like our stories are so similar, but we'll get to that later. So just at a really high level, I'm originally from Canada, did my undergrad at McGill in Montreal in chemical engineering and philosophy. mostly studying wastewater treatment and water chemistry. Went for a PhD at Northwestern in Chicago to study heterogeneous catalysis and CO2 conversion for the solar fuels concept. For energy storage, realized that hydrocarbons are not a great energy technology platform in general, regardless of where the energy comes from, because of efficiency losses in around 2015, 2016. I ended up leaving my PhD with a master's to co-found a lithium extraction technology company called Lilac Solutions, which also went on to raise money from Breakthrough Energy Ventures last year. So I'm very, very proud of that. And now they're still kicking, a 20-person team. But I left almost exactly 2 years ago to start my own company, kind of roughly consulting to project developers, investors, governments, and all different types of stakeholders all around the world who are interested in technology innovation in lithium extraction and processing. So over the last 2 years, I've spent my time researching and working on lithium projects which seek to utilize novel technologies to make lithium chemicals from unconventional natural resources. And on my website, there's a kind of little library of free public research articles that anyone can go access and download, focused on all these different topics, including geothermal lithium, sedimentary clays in Nevada, and conventional processing like evaporative lithium brine processing and hard rock mining and all these different topics. So today, the DOE asked me to kind of give an intro to geothermal lithium and why it is interesting and important. So geothermal lithium at a high level is essentially the concept of killing two birds with one stone with a hot mineralized geothermal brine resource. So in most geothermal energy kind of projects, a brine or water is pumped from very deep in the ground, from where it is hot and pressurized. Energy is extracted and power is made, and then that brine is reinjected. Some of those brines are mineralized and contain lithium and other potential resources like manganese and a couple others. So the idea behind geothermal lithium is to co-produce lithium chemicals and geothermal energy simultaneously. And there are reasons to think that this could be a very low carbon intensity production pathway to make lithium chemicals from natural resource. And to be clear, regardless of what you see on the internet, where's my thing? Lithium is currently not made from geothermal brine. So this is not a TRL9 operation yet. What is a brine? Back to basics. So a brine is water found in nature with minerals dissolved in it. And there are a couple different types of brines. Bankers like to kind of put brines into different tidy buckets. That's not how nature does it. In nature, the physical and chemical properties of brines exist on a continuum. And here I've given kind of like a high level kind of map of where three kind of different types of brines kind of live. So salar brines, like you may hear about in South America, are low temperature and atmospheric pressure mostly, since they're in unconfined aquifers near the surface. Geothermal brines are kind of the opposite, so they're much deeper, much hotter, and often pressurized. Oil field brines are kind of somewhere in the middle. So those physical and mechanical properties kind of bleed through to through the geochemistry. So if a brine is hot and pressurized, it's more likely to dissolve certain materials which would not be dissolved in a salar type brine, and it results in different pH and ORP and different compositions. So for example, a geothermal lithium brine will usually have very high calcium concentration, whereas salar brines typically have much lower calcium concentration. At the heart of geothermal lithium is DLE, or direct lithium extraction. This is so DLE is not a technology. It is a family of technologies. There are many types of DLE that work on all different types of physical principles. And really just generally, a direct lithium extraction technology leverages selective properties of an engineered material to take lithium out of a complex matrix of other salts, like a brine. And proponents of DLE technologies almost always claim that their technology enables kind of this list of advantages. Maybe not every technology claims every single one of these advantages, but most do. So I've summarized them here. And I've spent a lot of time studying the DLE technology space over the last 2 years. So I co-founded a DLE technology startup 4 or 5 years ago. And since I left, I've been tracking all different types of DLE technology solutions all around the world. Right now, I think my list is 60 different names, trying to understand what are the best ideas in the DLE technology space, and how do you develop DLE projects? Because I'll explain shortly, they're desirable kind of project to build if you can make it work. So at a very high level, this is like a generic geothermal lithium brine processing flow sheet. So geothermal brine is produced from underground. The energy is extracted, so that the temperature and pressure drops subsequently. The brine chemistry is sometimes changed a little bit to potentially remove certain components that can be issues for DLE technologies. Those wastes are removed from the brine. The lithium is removed using DLE technology, and then the brine with most of the lithium removed is reinjected into the earth. And out of the DLE technology comes a lithium concentrate, which can be a lithium chloride or lithium sulfate solution, which is purified, upgraded, and converted into battery chemicals that can be sold to cathode manufacturers. Geothermal lithium is interesting. We're talking about it now, and I work on it because of the potentially very, very favorable environmental performance profile of a lithium chemical compared to alternatives. So today, about half of the world's lithium is made from Australian spodumene mined in Western Australia and shipped to China for chemical conversion into lithium chemicals. And the other half is made from brines in South America that leverage evaporative processing technologies. Though there is one DLE operation in Argentina operating today and has been operating for the last 20 years, but it's kind of a hybrid type flow sheet. And part of my work with a company called Minviro in London has been to quantify and understand the CO2 emission breakdown of making lithium chemicals from different types of resources. And we have modeled the CO2 intensity of lithium production from geothermal brines, both in Germany and California, and have found that if they work well at commercial scale, the same way that they are projected to work at kind of feasibility study level today, then they could be some of the most competitive lithium chemicals on the planet in terms of CO2 intensity and cost, potentially. So there's actually no green premium, as Uncle Bill would say. It's actually cost competitive too, potentially. But really interestingly, what it unlocks is the ability to make lithium chemicals from very small physical footprint. So if there's no evaporation ponds needed and no open pit, it drastically reduces the number of square meters required to make a certain quantity of lithium chemicals per year. So geothermal lithium is actually not like a low TRL exercise anymore. There are currently 3 geothermal lithium projects that are true commercial projects. They're not science projects with TRL over 5. So significant progress has already kind of taken place, and a lot has been done over the last 12 years in California, which is really the where geothermal lithium kind of originated in the Salton Sea. So there are no geothermal lithium chemicals being produced at commercial scale today, but I would be very surprised if there aren't in 2030. Geothermal lithium is really interesting to me because I think about it like kind of pushing the envelope of kind of technology cutting edge. So there's some. I started publishing and talking about and working on life cycle assessment modeling of lithium chemical production from natural resources about 1.5 years ago, and when we first started publishing on that topic, quantifying kind of more accurately than had been done historically the CO2 emissions associated with making battery chemicals, a lot of people looked at me and said, "Who cares, right?" If we're gonna take an internal combustion engine off the road, then it's probably good enough. Like, why do I have to care about CO2 emissions of lithium processing, right? That dialogue has totally changed. And lithium buyers now do care about the CO2 intensity of their chemicals. And they will care more and more in the future. So I think it's important to always be pulling the Overton window towards decarbonization, and pull people along kicking and screaming, whether they like it or not. And I really liked what Tim said about, when he started in the space, people thought he was crazy. If like for me, like if people don't think I'm crazy, then I'm doing something wrong, honestly. So yeah, what a difference a year makes from when we were here last. This prize is about to be announced. It's super exciting, and I'm really excited to see what comes of it. May the odds be ever in your favor, competitors. Good luck, and I'm around if you ever want to chat about geothermal lithium. Geothermal lithium is a big deal. Mostly because I think of it as a very technologically sophisticated and desirable kind of endeavor to pursue, and more people should pursue it and try to help. That kind of activity in that part of the value chain for making lithium-ion batteries, and the lithium deposit to concentrate and concentrate to battery chemical kind of sections, kind of the far upstream, it is desirable to pursue. Partly because, first of all, there are cost and environmental benefits of integrating those operations to some extent. But more so, there are many benefits of value chain participation. The U.S. will very soon have the downstream 4 columns of the battery value chain really dominated by Tesla, really. But the upstream is still relatively primordial. Today the U.S. produces 1% of the world's lithium chemicals from Clayton Valley in Nevada, and there are a number of big projects in development to change that. And geothermal lithium in the Salton Sea could be a part of that, and also DLE operations from oil field type brines in Arkansas will hopefully also be a part of that. As you can see here, China is the only jurisdiction in the world that truly owns every step of its value chain. That's desirable for a large number of reasons. If I'm tasked with solving some kind of technical issue in geothermal lithium, like scaling or some kind of high temperature processing operation or whatever it may be, then there's spillover benefits to me having to go research a bunch of kilns or whatever it is. In order to solve that problem, I end up developing competence to solve a lot of other problems. And I think that results in geopolitical influence and really power, frankly. And I think it's important that young people are aggressively entering industry, such as the lithium industry and all other chemical and energy industries, and working on kind of upgrading and evolving those industries, because we have a climate crisis on our hands, and we got to we have to change the way we make these things very soon. And I know we're up for the challenge. So I think innovation is the American way. Look what SpaceX did in 10 years with rocketry. It's absolutely like mind-blowing. And I'm sure we can do the same for lithium chemical extraction and processing and all the other kind of challenges that we have on our plate when it comes to decarbonization. So just to wrap up, I'm excited to learn more about the prize that the DOE is announcing. Yeah, thanks again, Sean, so much for inviting me to speak today. And if anyone wants to chat in more detail about any of these topics, feel free to reach out. Here's my email, my Twitter, and there's tons of free content on my website, so help yourselves. So yeah, looking forward to see what comes of it.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Alex. And it looks like you already had a few questions in the chat as well. So if folks want those resources, I know Alex has a lot of them through Jade Cove, but also this afternoon during the career panel, I'm sure Alex will be able and willing to answer more questions like those. So thank you again for your participation today, all of your insights on geothermal lithium and the importance of DLE technology innovations. This brings us actually to our final announcement of the day that Alex has done a fantastic job of previewing, which involves our brand new challenge that we here in DOE are really super excited about. To tell us about all the details, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Alex Pristashev, who is a general engineer and a program lead for this new prize at the U.S. Department of Energy's Geothermal Technologies Office. Alex, please, over to you.
Thank you. Can you hear me and see me all right?
We can hear you loud and clear, yep.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Sean. And thanks, Alex Grant. So after hearing Alex G speak about the role geothermal can play in lithium extraction, you might be wondering how you too can be involved in geothermal lithium. As our country seeks cleaner, more sustainable forms of energy to power our lives and economy, lithium is becoming a crucial element in the clean energy supply chain. Currently, the U.S. lithium stock is almost entirely imported, with only 1% of U.S. lithium supply being sourced domestically. Traditionally, sources of lithium can be environmentally destructive and cost prohibitive due to the complexity of this extraction process. The combination of rapidly expanding global demand and lack of secure domestic supply has created an urgency to develop a safe, domestic, and cost-competitive source of lithium. So by using geothermal lithium brines to extract lithium, it's become a more sustainable way to harness the lithium resources needed for electric vehicle batteries, grid scale electrical storage, and more. Advancements in domestic geothermal lithium extraction can also help ensure the American leadership in the transition to a carbon-free economy and clean energy jobs creation throughout a robust domestic supply chain. So today, I'm very excited to announce the newest prize in the American Made Challenges program. We have the American Made Geothermal Lithium Extraction Prize. So this prize will be a $4 million prize challenge. Challenges clean energy champions like yourself to find solutions that de-risk and increase market viability for direct lithium extraction from geothermal brines. This prize will be 3 phases, and throughout these 3 phases, participants will work to identify, develop, and test these solutions and are eligible to earn cash prizes for the progress. So as of today, the Geothermal Lithium Extraction Prize is officially open to participants affiliated with a U.S. academic institution. And we are excited to encourage a broader geothermal community to participate, including participants with background in geothermal, oil and gas, mining, geology, geochemistry, all the geosciences, engineering, and beyond. Submissions for this prize are for phase 1 are due July 2nd, 2021. To find out more on the prize, the Geothermal Technologies Office and the National Renewable Energy Lab are hosting an informational webinar on Monday, April 12th. And you can register for that webinar using the link that I think Katie is sending right now in the chat box. And I encourage all of you, whether you're a traditional geothermal, within the traditional geothermal community or not, oil and gas, mining, whatever, and you're interested in this prize and interested in getting involved with the geothermal community and lithium extraction, I encourage you to participate in the geothermal lithium extraction prize. We need everyone to help grow our clean energy economy and support our domestic supply chain. So thank you and good luck. And so now I will turn it back over to Sue.
Actually, I'm going to turn it to Sean for 1 minute.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Alex. What really, we're really hammering home here both the innovation that GTO is tackling on all fronts: manufacturing, lithium extraction, STEM, collegiate sort of workforce development angle. So I hope everyone is excited about these announcements as we are sort of making the announcements. So we're going to take a short break until 2:15 p.m. Eastern time, so about 8 minutes. After which you will definitely want to stick around because Kelly Speaks Backman will be joining us shortly in order to talk about the clean energy transition opportunities that the Biden administration is rolling out, and so and how geothermal can play a role in that. So look forward to seeing you all here in a few minutes. Thanks. Perhaps while we wait, there were a few questions in the chat. Thank you again for all of the active interest and questions that we've had in here. Maybe I might invite Tim Latimer, although Tim looks like he may be typing an answer out right now, to one of the questions here. But maybe from the first standpoint, you're talking about the major differences between geothermal and oil and gas. Much has been discussed. But the differences still obviously are maybe sometimes stark in terms of what folks are considering. So curious if you have any thoughts on the synergies versus the differences and sort of where you see things kind of meeting in between.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, I mean, Jamie teed this up well before, talking about how really the skills and equipment are what can transfer. And if you think about the oil and gas industry, yes, there's tools, yes, there's drilling rigs, but more than anything else, there's a capability and a know-how of understanding the geology and understanding how to deliver wells and understanding how to overcome challenges in the subsurface. And if the geology was the same and if there was no adaptation required, then all of our jobs would be done and things like this wouldn't exist. But you can't just copy paste a well program from an oil and gas job to deliver results in the geothermal industry. And so there are key differences. I think in general, some of the differences are, number one, the rock type that we typically target in geothermal is different. If you think about my background in shale, shale is generally a softer rock. It's well understood, it's low permeability. What we deal with in the geothermal sector is quite a bit different. It's harder rock, it can be more fractured, there can be lost circulation issues. So you got to deal with it being a harder, different rock. The other thing is kind of in the name, geothermal is hot. And we have to deal with high temperature tools, and high temperature challenges everything. It makes your geochemistry more challenging. It makes your electronics more challenging to operate. It makes your elastomers more challenging to operate. It makes your fluids more challenging to handle. So there has to be new innovation. And I think many of the prizes in this very competition are around how we can use additive manufacturing to increase the temperature capability, so it's hotter. And finally, you have to think about the performance requirements. There's less energy in a hot barrel of water than there is in a barrel of oil. And so we have to compensate by having higher flow rates. And that requires new innovations around pumping and larger wells. So to summarize, and I'll wrap it up here because it looks like our speaker's here, but the rocks are hotter, the wells are hotter, and we have to drill them bigger to achieve higher flow rates. There's plenty of room for innovation to adapt to the differences between oil and gas and geothermal. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, thank you. And we're all in on it for sure. And I believe Kelly may be online. So Sue, please take it away.
Okay, so I think we have Kelly Speaks Backman with us now. So,
I'm here. I'm here.
Yay.
Can you hear me?
We can. So let me introduce you. We are so excited that Kelly is able to be here, and even more excited that we've been able to overcome our technology issues this morning to get her here. So it is my pleasure, my distinct pleasure, to introduce Kelly Speaks Backman. Kelly is the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, EERE, and Acting Assistant Secretary at the U.S. Department of Energy. In her role, she leads and directs the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, focused on creating and sustaining American leadership in the transition to a global clean energy economy. She oversees the planning and execution of the organization's $2.8 billion portfolio of research development, demonstration, and deployment activities in energy efficiency, renewable energy, and sustainable transportation. Prior to joining DOE, Kelly served as the first CEO of the Energy Storage Association, the National Trade Association for the energy storage industry. She has spent more than 20 years working in energy and environmental issues in the public, NGO, and private sectors. In 2019, she was honored by the Queenie Awards as Woman of the Year. So with that, I'm so excited to introduce Kelly Speaks Backman. Kelly, over to you.
Hi, Sue. Thank you. And oh my gosh, I am so sorry to be so disruptive to your schedule. I know you have a lot of great things to be talking about today, and my technical challenges are not one of them. So let's get right into it. We just had a lot of great announcements. I was actually online and I heard and I saw the great announcements that were going on in geothermal. I'm excited to be here to talk a little bit about the importance of geothermal research and development and innovation. But first, I wanted to spend just a little bit of time to share EERE's role in realizing the administration's priorities. The Biden administration has laid out a framework to address the climate crisis and to put America on this irreversible path to achieving a carbon-free electricity sector by 2035 and 100% whole clean energy economy with net zero emissions not later than 2050. Our mission within EERE is to drive the research, development, and I will underscore the demonstration and deployment of innovative technologies and systems and practices that are going to transition us to that 100% clean energy economy, and that are also going to ensure that that economy benefits all Americans. That's an important element of what we're doing. Transitioning to this is going to lead to the creation of millions of good-paying middle-class jobs, and it's going to ensure clean, affordable, and reliable energy options for all Americans. I'll just tell you, we've got a lot of work to do, and we can't do it alone. So I'm really glad to be here with you all today. We're committed to expanding our collaboration and making sure that we're working with both our federal and our non-federal partners. We're going to closely coordinate with the labs and with the DOE offices, the agencies, tribal and local governments, as well as industry and non-governmental partners. And it's in this context that we've developed our programmatic, our diversity and inclusion, and our environmental justice priorities to cooperate with industry to achieve these shared energy, climate, equity, and economic goals. So I'll talk a little bit about our programmatic priorities here in EERE, and the first one is really to generate our electricity from clean renewable sources by 2035. We even saw it earlier today in the announcements from the White House with his jobs and infrastructure package. It's really, his clean energy package is a jobs package. So to transition to this carbon-free electricity sector, we're going to have to drive down the cost of large-scale renewables like wind, solar, and geothermal. We're going to have to proactively support the permitting and the deployment of new renewables. We're going to have to ensure that these renewables are integrated into the resilient power system with enough flexibility, and that includes generation and demand and storage technologies. And lastly, we're going to have to reduce our dependence on the critical materials that go into producing these products. The second priority we have is to decarbonize the transportation sector across all modes. So that's not just EVs, although that's a super important part of it. It's air, sea, rail, and road. And we're working towards setting some ambitious goals for each of these modes. For sustainable EVs in particular, the president's vision really is to deploy these 500,000 new public charging points by 2030. And for that to happen, we've got to address the technical and the cross-industry coordination needs for a national charging infrastructure that's going to align with this move to a high renewables grid. Our third programmatic priority is decarbonizing energy-intense industries. They can currently contribute as much as 20% of the nation's carbon emissions. So we're going to be developing specific roadmaps to guide research and development and demonstration and deployment activities across the department to phase out these net greenhouse gas emissions. It's going to rely on renewable, like concentrated solar power thermal, to power these industrial processes as well. The next priority is reducing the carbon footprint of the U.S. building stock. We have a significant opportunity to accelerate the building sector's transformation even further, to scale its energy performance up in time to meet the growing urgency of this climate crisis. And lastly, we're going to be looking to provide energy and water pathways to enable the first global net zero agricultural sector. We're working to promote rural energy and to fund pilot and demonstration technologies that are going to advance decarbonization of the agricultural sector. So all of these programmatic priorities are going to start with a whole of government approach to transition into this clean energy economy. And we're going to start that off with really a focus on diversity in STEM and the workforce. We've got to increase our outreach and raise awareness of clean energy research and job opportunities at minority-serving institutions and minority professional organizations, and we've already begun that work. One of the ways we've already started to do this is through our funding opportunities. We have the chance to ensure that organizations are getting our message, they're getting our funding actually, and they're thinking through diversity and equity in their work. We're also committed to funding workforce training opportunities and collegiate competitions like the Geothermal Collegiate Competition to prepare the future clean energy workforce. Workforce training is really more important now than ever before because we're going to be transitioning this economy and we need to create those millions of good paying jobs. It's also important that all the work that we're doing is going toward building a clean energy economy that benefits all Americans. And that's why the Biden administration is holding our agencies accountable for environmental injustices that disproportionately have affected communities of color, low-income communities, and indigenous communities. Across DOE, we're working to ensure 40% of the overall benefits of relevant federal investments are delivered to disadvantaged communities. So that means not only who we're funding, but to whom those benefits are going for the projects that are being funded. We're going to consider the environmental justice and equity impacts in the development and execution of all of our projects, as well as with the broader transition to a clean energy economy. So there's a lot of work to be done across EERE, and more specific to advancing the renewable energy technologies, is the geothermal work that is so important. We know that geothermal has a solid potential. Sue Ham, I've heard her say plenty of times that it's America's next renewable powerhouse. The Biden administration is really recognizing geothermal as an important element of America's renewable energy mix by 2035 and then on to 2050. And so today's announcements are building on this momentum. Prize competitions are a great way to meet our energy challenges. And these prizes don't just encourage innovation, they power it. They help level the playing field for students and young professionals. They're awakening minds and they're enabling new skills. They're helping to drive change. The new Lithium Extraction Prize holds great potential for improving geothermal energy's value proposition. And this new prize tackles a problem that's lingered for years, like how do we get a better, a more cost-effective, a more environmentally sound way to capture domestic lithium and other critical minerals? These valuable resources are critical to high-tech manufacturing, and they're here. We don't need to rely on imports. We can explore in our own backyard in the United States. In a nod to the GeoVision study, the heat beneath our feet includes minerals beneath our feet too. So I am so eager to watch this prize progress over the coming year. And in the coming months, I'm looking forward to sharing more about our vision for EERE and working with you all, with the wider geothermal community, to help make GeoVision a reality. Our work here at EERE wouldn't be possible without those of you who are here today. I just wish everyone could be here in person, actually. Events like this unite industry professionals. They bring students and entrepreneurs together. And the discussion on these key issues are so important to gain momentum and to take real action that drive us forward. So I just really appreciate, number one, your patience with me, and number two, your enthusiasm and the expertise and the participation in events like this, which are critical to our collective success. So thank you for having me. And Sue, again, I apologize for any issues that I've created with the technical challenges, but I appreciate you having me here today.
Kelly, we are so grateful that you made it. You know, technology issues aside, we are thrilled to have you. And we're only just a few minutes behind schedule because we were pretty far ahead of schedule. So thank you for your words. We are so excited to be supporting you and the entire DOE leadership team in everything you are doing. Could not be more excited. Thank you so much for coming today and sharing your words with this entire group of, you know, 200 folks. So that's fantastic.
Awesome.
And with that, we're going to say goodbye to Kelly and go back to Sean. Thanks again, Kelly. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Yes, I'll plus one everything Sue just said. Really do appreciate Kelly's time and hearing about all those exciting insights. Yeah, I can't wait to help execute that the clean energy plan. For everyone in the audience, first, we appreciate your patience. Thank you for helping us, being patient with us as we worked out our technical nuances on our end. We're excited to continue through the afternoon here because we have two breakout opportunities for you to attend. One is a career-focused panel on geothermal, as well as an industry networking event. The student career panel, or the Geo student career panel, is going to really feature an opportunity and advice for students, as well as others who are just interested in learning more about transitioning into geothermal or the clean energy fields more broadly. There's also going to be discussions, just generally speaking, about information for geothermal career paths, as well as an opportunity to ask questions and hear more from today's panelists, Jamie, Tim, and Alex. I know folks had a lot of great questions in the chat, and I apologize that we aren't able to get to them here during the main part of our program. So I would encourage you to reserve those questions and save them for the discussions here with the panelists. And if you're interested in doing so, we ask that you stay here in the Zoom platform, and we'll be kicking off that panel in just a few minutes. If instead you'd actually like to take a different tack and engage with folks today on topics beyond the career panel, we are also hosting an industry networking event over on another platform called Remo. This networking event will give you the opportunity to network with multidisciplinary geothermal industry professionals, to congratulate winners from the Geothermal Manufacturing Prize, meet the AMC Prize Administration team, and ask questions about the new Geothermal Lithium Extraction Prize. In order to access this networking event, you will need to click on the link that I believe is being sent into the chat as we speak, and exit the Zoom event as you transition over to Remo. You are welcome to stay in either session, depending upon your interests. And again, for those who have questions, please bring them either to the panel or find us at the industry networking event. We're happy to have a conversation with you. First, just want to really say to everyone who's joined us today, our wonderful guest speakers, to DOE leadership and to our partners, thank you so much for being a part of NextGen Geo. And good luck to all the competitors and innovators out there. We had an exciting sort of cadre of projects and opportunities we just spoke to in the prize front, and I can't wait to see the impact that all of you have in geothermal. With that, I'm going to let everybody go ahead and move around and get settled into either the networking event or the career panel here in Zoom. So thank you very much, everybody.
Hello, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Metcalf. You heard from me earlier. I'm the lead on the geothermal student competition, or now known as the Geothermal Collegiate Competition. I'm going to be moderating the panel today as well. And we're inviting, as Sean just went over, we're inviting everybody to come and kind of learn from our 3 panelists about how they got into the geothermal space. And of course, we'll have some opportunities to address questions from the audience, hopefully. And so you can submit those via Zoom, and we can get to as many as we can over the next hour. So I would like to reintroduce or remind everybody who we're talking with Alex Grant, Jamie Beard, and Tim Latimer. They gave pretty good bios of themselves earlier today. So I will sort of move past that really fast. And I'll reiterate, so the career panel is what it's a career panel. And I anticipate there's a lot of students out in the audience. However, I think that this discussion will be useful for anybody that wants to sort of understand how to get involved in geothermal, all the myriad paths that can take you there, and some useful tips and resources to get you there. And I was really struck so I'm in the Geothermal Technologies office. I have a geology background, and I did not anticipate working for the federal government myself. I did not anticipate working in the field of geothermal energy myself. Listening to all the speakers today, I was struck by how incredibly accomplished everybody. We've got Forbes 30 under 30. We've got people starting up incubators. We have some incredible minds with us today, and I couldn't be more different. I always sort of figured I would be traveling a lot. I wanted to be a geologist, so I would never sit in an office. I was going to be traveling all the time. I wouldn't have a family, all of these different things. And over the years, I sort of instinctively made decisions, never had a 5-year plan. And here I am in my late 30s with a family and a mortgage and sitting in an office. And frankly, it was never in the cards. I never thought I would end up here or be in, working in the geothermal space, of course, but really I couldn't really be happier or feel like my job, feel more as fulfilled by my career, and that my career would have lasting meaning. And of course, this is all enabled by the current political situation, and being lucky enough to be working for the federal government at this particular juncture. So I sort of mentioned that everybody is super successful, very successful, and seemingly made all of the right decisions through their life, and ended up in geothermal. But I know that's probably overly reductive. So I just wanted to sort of, I'll kick it to Jamie first, and I'll go through all the other panelists. But so Jamie, what's your background, and like what got you excited about geothermal, and how did you make it there? Was it a concerted effort, or were you just
so I would love to be able to claim some grand plan that I followed, and yeah, that's not how it happened at all. So it was also a winding road, but I started out in environmental and energy law at a large law firm, and around the time I was representing big corporations and oil and gas companies, and it was largely defense work. And I'm an environmentalist and a climate activist, and I realized around the time of the BP oil spill, which that oil spill wrapped up every single large law firm in the world in defense, including mine. And I realized around that time that I was on the wrong side, and that I was not doing the type of work that I had hoped to do getting into energy environmental law. So I jumped into an MIT spinoff as a second employee there, an ARPA-E funded company. And that's how I got into geothermal, because we were developing a high temperature drilling tool. It was actually an energy storage device that turned into a drilling tool. And that's how I got excited about geothermal. That was just about around the time that the Future of Geothermal Energy report was published, the MIT report. And I found that really, really inspiring. and applied for some GTO money for my startup back then. So that's how we got, I mean, it was literally that grant that got me involved with geothermal and got me funded to work on geothermal. And it's how I learned about the oil and gas industry, because I was out on rigs deploying tools. And and then here we are. So it was really a winding road. It was accidental largely, but that's kind of, you know, serendipitous in that way. So anyway, I'll give it up to the other panelists.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
it was
no, I think it's really lovely.
It was all GTO for me.
Okay, so you know, we'll claim success with you as you move forward with Geo. Yeah, that'll be great. Sure. You know, I really like what you mentioned about. It's so interesting how there's been so many defining environmental moments over the years that have sort of altered all. You know, I think a lot of people in our generation, the trajectory through, you know, the BP oil spill was, and like, there's just so many events, and the environmental aspects of it, and sort of recognizing that, you know, that there's maybe a right side and a wrong side. You know, there's almost a morality to these choices that we're making around energy. And so I'm wondering, you know, Tim, I'll turn it over to you. Like you sort of touched on how you were in oil and gas too, if I recall, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead. Oh no, I was just gonna say, like, I just want you to sort of, you know, go back to that and talk about what you know, with the morality question and what brought you into geothermal.
Yeah, I mean, I think first just to talk about what brought me into you know, drilling and subsurface technology development. I mean, it's just an incredibly interesting field. And you know, I graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering in 2012, and this entire industry that a few years ago, you know, hadn't even been in, you know, all the EIA energy forecasts of drilling for tight oil and tight gas through shale, was just absolutely booming. And as an engineering student, I mean, I just started wrapping my head around what would happen at these locations. You know, people were drilling 10,000 feet down and then would be drilling 10,000 feet horizontally, and had all of these sensors to measure what was going on. And it was totally new and you know, not predicted by any of kind of the biggest mainstream folks. And so I got really captivated by just the growth and the innovation and the opportunities in the oil and gas sector. And I, you know, like that. I also, as a Texan, like the ability to stay, you know, close to home with my career move. And so I joined, and it just turned out to be, you know, a fantastic place to start my career. And, you know, working with geoscientists and engineers and commercial folks, just, you know, developing the subsurface is so interesting because it's as interdisciplinary as you can get, because the problems that you solve touch on, you know, everything from fundamental geoscience to data science to material science to everything else. So it's just a really fun place to start my career. And honestly, if it hadn't been for climate change, there's no way I would have ever moved on from oil and gas, because you work with great people and solve big challenges. But I, you know, started seeing signs and learning more about climate, and got to think about, I mean, the main thing for me, and particularly since this is an audience focused on college students and kind of career going forward there, I started thinking about my career being a relatively young professional in the sector, realizing I wasn't going to retire until probably the 2060s. And I looked at all these projections around, if the world takes action on climate change, what's that going to do to the oil and gas industry? And didn't want to spend, whether it was the last 10 years, the last 30 years or longer of my career in an industry that was in decline. So I started looking for something new and different. And I already mentioned, you know, some of these weather events that we experience in Texas, being somebody from Houston, the frequent flooding, you realize something's different whenever you get 1 in 500 year floods every single year. You know, you realize something's changing. And so there was a sense of urgency for me on that. And then serendipity kind of intervened, where I was drilling at the time in the Eagle Ford in South Texas, and the wells in the Eagle Ford are really hot from an oil and gas standpoint. And in fact, you know, we were drilling in a window that got up to 325 degrees F, and it was, you know, really throwing us for a loop from a fluid reliability and tool reliability side. So I started researching this, And it turned out all of the, research for high temperature drilling came from this field called geothermal, which at this point in time in my career, I'd never heard of before. And so I was really fascinated by it, and actually read that same MIT report that Jamie referred to, The Future of Geothermal, that came out in 2006. And I read a sentence in there that said, if these technical challenges could be overcome, this industry could change the world, basically. And I thought, I've been surrounded by all this incredible subsurface innovation. What if this could be used to address climate change? And I never got the idea out of my head, and just kept pursuing it. And I think for just general advice of how I went from there to where I am today, now working for the last 4+ years in the geothermal sector, I think one of the first things you can do is there's I went back to school, and that's a path you can take. It's not required, but it was really helpful for me to go get a graduate degree and learn more skills, especially around that were specific to the geothermal sector. But it's not necessary. I think the one thing that's great that the DOE does and some of these conferences that provide public literature is you can learn so much just from what's publicly available. So kind of the best place I always tell people to start is go read the GeoVision study. And it kind of teaches you all about geothermal. And go to the Stanford conference paper database and search through and read some of those, particularly if you're a technical or an engineering person. And I've been a little bit surprised. We're growing our team very quickly. We've hired over a dozen people just in the last year, which has been really exciting for us. And a lot of times candidates don't do their homework on geothermal, and that's really challenging whenever you're joining a company that's working in the geothermal sector. So make use of those public resources, and you can learn a lot on your own, and it really will make you stand out in job interviews as you kind of pursue, like showing that you've done your homework there. So that's a piece of advice I give to people. And also just show folks your enthusiasm for the sector. Like people want to believe that you're in it for the long haul and see that you're enthusiastic about it. So that's another piece of advice that I think, by the time I started talking to folks in the geothermal sector, I'd read the Future of Geothermal study from MIT, cover to cover, and I'd done all these things and had done my best to really educate myself. So it would really give people that advice. And the final piece of advice I'll give is a lot more probably practical, and hopefully, Elizabeth, you forgive me for this shameless plug, but if you're interested in transitioning to the geothermal sector, go to fervoenergy.com, click the Join Us page, and particularly for the folks here that are college or early career, we've got a position open right now for people with 0 to 2 years of experience to work in our development organization, supporting our commercial operations. So we've been hiring quite a bit, and that's probably a good fit for some folks in this audience. So go take a look. It's a position that can be either in San Francisco or Houston, and would love to, there's my most, nuts and bolts tip of the day on how to transition into geothermal is go check out our website and apply for our position.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty on the money. That's pretty on the nose for our career panel. It's an invitation to join a company. So, and Alex, you have a sort of a similar sort of trajectory in your career path as Tim. If I'm not, again, paraphrasing too much, but do you want to talk a little bit about, how you got into geothermal, if it was as serendipitous as Jamie and Tim, and do you have any interesting tidbits and advice that you picked up along the way? I think folks would like to hear.
Yeah, I mean, my story was actually almost polar opposite. So I never worked in oil and gas. I was in undergrad in Montreal from 2010 to 2015 at McGill, and in the chemical engineering program in Canada. Okay, so my faculty was a recruiting operation for the Alberta tar sands. Period. Like all of my friends would go to Fort McMurray almost like every summer to work in oil and gas. And I was like the radical tree hugger who said, you guys are wasting your time, that your industry is going to die and I will help kill it. And and you guys are developing networks and professional skills in the tar sands, which will become much less useful. but the network more than anything, right? Which will kind of relate to my part two. And to be clear, I 100% agree with Tim and Jamie's thesis about subsurface understanding from oil and gas being applicable to geothermal energy. That's spot on, and I agree with that. So my views have evolved and become more nuanced for sure. But I think it's important to be radical from time to time, because we got to pull along the people who are less radical, and that's how you end up with a happy medium in the end. But yeah, so I've been anti-oil and gas my entire life, though very, very cognizant of the technical capabilities that are certainly valuable for geothermal and other drilling. So I advise a technology company in South America called Zelandes, which leverages oil and gas kind of exploration techniques in lithium brine exploration. And there are a bunch of ex-Schlumberger folks who essentially took like off-the-shelf, very straightforward approaches from oil and gas and applied it to lithium brines, and improved exploration and development significantly by doing that. So I was mostly doing like water chemistry research in undergrad, and then I had a brief kind of, I guess, foray into small chain hydrocarbons and kind of gas phase chemistry and engineering. But yeah, I mean, my story is very much the story of the evolving and kind of growing kind of consensus around energy technology platforms for decarbonization. I was working on solar fuels, reacting CO2 with hydrogen to make methanol. I have a vial of it here today, the methanol I made. But yeah, I just realized hydrocarbons were a silly way to do this for a number of reasons. Yeah, I think it's important that we transition away from storing energy in hydrocarbons and in chemical fuels and towards inorganic and more minerally type I guess technologies. So that's what got me into lithium and lithium brines, and then of course finally into geothermal lithium. So the thing I was going to circle back on is like networks. You cannot get anything done in this world without a network. I don't know if that sounds like some kind of corporate sellout statement, but I think it's just factually correct. You really need to have friends you need to have a diversity of friends who know about different things, people you can call on when you have a question about the topic that they know a lot about. And that's huge. So being friendly is important. And like, I don't call it networking, I just call it making friends. Like, I just think it's really important just to have friends all across different industries. And then I saw one question in the chat directed at me about about PhDs. So so I am a PhD dropout. I hated grad school. I hate everything about it. In a PhD, you are put in an environment where you are put in a lonely environment. You are put in an environment where you like, collaboration is not like, everyone's got their own thing going on, and like collaboration doesn't really like it's not as real and material as it is in a company. Like in a company, when you're trying to achieve some kind of commercial goal, like you're like soldiers in the same battalion, like you're in it together big time. But in a PhD, like ultimately it's you against the committee alone, right? And you need to extract, like, competitive. It's competitive, and like, yeah, you need to extract enough value from the research program to prove yourself, right? I think calling a PhD lonely is not a controversial statement. I mean, I think most people experience that. But when you get into the real world, collaboration is critical for doing complex projects. I've worked with a couple PhDs who, like, I'm very atypical. I'm not like a typical PhD person. I'm relatively extroverted, and I get bored. I could never like study one little thing for 5 years. I'd go crazy. But yeah, PhDs tend to like carry with them a lot of that kind of emotional intelligence and like kind of that emotional intelligence they learned in grad school, of fighting for work streams and not having kind of like the emotional safety that you develop after you work with people long enough in an emotionally safe environment, which some companies have. So yeah, so what would I say to PhDs who are graduating who want to thrive in industry? I would say check your ego at the door, right? Like put it down, and like just realize, like, if you're joining a company, someone's hiring you to solve their problems fundamentally, and like that's your job. Like achieving ego goals is not, like, you shouldn't be trying to achieve ego goals. You should be trying to achieve the goals set out by the company, and the goals that are associated with your work streams. So yeah, big PhDs often have really big ego issues, and there's nothing wrong with ego. Ego can be very motivating. I have been motivated by ego in the past. I think largely I'm not motivated by ego anymore. But it's a huge factor with PhDs, I think, that needs to be managed.
Yeah. Actually, so Jamie, actually, you're in a unique position of like working with many PhDs.
Yeah, I
like
actually
at UT Austin.
Yeah. And I find PhD level folks and postdocs to actually be excellent entrepreneurs. They've got the technical background, in particular if they've studied a geoscience or petroleum engineering. So they've got a really interesting, and typically they have some industry experience because they're a little bit further along in their careers, and they have the time to really think about it. They've got resources at the university in terms of faculty members and advisors to help them along in their ideation. So for a good deal of the startups that I'm working with through Geo, there is a postdoc or a PhD level person either leading the company as CEO or in some executive role, or doing a lot of the work behind the scenes for a faculty member who's leading the company. So, I think that, that type of position lends itself well with the right personality. I mean, you can't throw PhDs into a bucket entirely in terms of, personality types, but with the right appreciation and interest for high risk, high reward stuff, and the right attitude, I think that type of person really is a really interesting prospect for recruitment for a startup.
And where do we find that balance between industry experience, and lots of degrees? Like, at what point do you have to sort of start, and how do you do that? How do you market yourself as, I always kid that, when there's a job opening, it's, you must have 5 years of experience, but every job opening seems to have that requirement. So what are what first jobs should people, strive to after they get a degree, to build experience so that they can apply for the ones that they really want? I'm curious, Tim, do you have an answer for that?
I wish I did have a better answer for you. And that, I mean, I think back to the job I took, and honestly, a big part of my decision-making process on the job I took was that they gave me a job offer. I think especially when you're early in your career, it can be really difficult. And I was fortunate to get one that I really liked, and I jumped on it. And I think one of the things that's interesting is I mean, I think there's a theme across this panel here of a lot of serendipity in your career choices. And there's no way that I would be doing what I am doing now had I not started my career as a drilling engineer. And there's also no way I would have started my career as a drilling engineer if that's not where I would have gotten that first job offer. So I think in some ways it can be difficult to chart that course, and especially when you're early in your career, you can't really be overly prescriptive about it. And I think anybody who gives you huge pieces of advice on optimizing that first job, I think it's a little bit too much. So I think that the key is to find a job that you think excites you. Figure out early on if you're engaged by the work and energized by the people who are around you, and if you join an organization that is focused on personal development and personal growth and training, and if so, stick around and continue to learn. And if not, there's always other opportunities out there, and you can't really chart the path too strongly. I just think, go after stuff that sounds interesting, and then, find out if it's for you within the first couple of years of you being there. And it's always, it's easier. It gets easier as you go, I think, to find what you are passionate about and interested in than it is right when you're starting out.
Yeah, actually, you said something interesting that, like if you end up having to, you're taking jobs instinctively, or you're taking the job that you've been offered just to pay the bills or whatever. Maybe you haven't sort of like dialed in exactly what you want. Like, what are the best things that you can do, in a job that's not offering you a lot? Like you might not want to go stay in the company, pursue that particular discipline. Like, what kind of trainings, how can you maximize, how can you purchase as much as possible from that job before you move on? Like, what kind of things should you be doing? So I've heard networking, making friends. I've heard training. What other things? Alex, do you have anything other than making friends is a good one. I like that.
Make friends. Literally nothing replaces actual interest in a topic. Nothing.
Yeah.
If you are interested in it, study it and do it, and make friends who do it, and they will help you find a job or whatever it may be. It might not take 2 weeks. It might take 2 months. It might take 2 years. But if you actually have to care about something. But just to make a comment about what Tim was saying about like serendipity and not trying to like over-engineer the beginning of your career, I think that's really true. Like I started out in like water chemistry and wastewater treatment, which it's not energy technology related. I mean, there's a water energy nexus that is huge, right? Like you can have a lot of water if you spend a lot of energy. But I think it is important just to start getting your hands dirty and pay your dues a little bit when you get going. Like in my first job, I was doing wastewater treatment, and I was literally putting human feces in a blender. Okay, like that was my first job.
Wow.
In undergrad, I know. Wow, right? It was terrible. It was horrible. It was horrible. It was so disgusting, right? But I learned so much on that job, and I learned so much about water chemistry, and I learned about things that I still use today, and I just got started, and now it's a ridiculous story, right? It's good to have ridiculous stories. Sorry, one other thing that Jamie was saying that I liked, or just to add on, I guess, to what Jamie was saying, is like, there are lots of attributes of doing a PhD, which are, I think, valuable to entrepreneurship. And I think the number one is research, right? So in a PhD, you are taught how to acquire high value information and a large quantity of high value information. Like it's like an axis of like quantity of information and quality. And children kind of start out with neither, right? And then really successful professionals end up in the other end of the spectrum with a high quantity of high quality information. Because to be able to minimize the entropy of high quality information is how you make good decisions and how you create value. And PhDs, someone with a PhD training has that skill. So when you're doing research in academia or in grad school or in industry, because I feel like a lot of my time is spent doing research fundamentally. It's just putting together information in the right way. That is a very communicable, I guess, useful skill. So.
Well, and that makes me, so it's something that I've been picking up on more and more. So I work for Dewey and interact with a lot of scientists, and there seems to be more and more emphasis on making sure that you're a good scientist first and foremost, but you're also a good communicator. And so I'm just wondering, like, how can people develop that skill, or why do you think that that's important, and how can they develop that kind of skill? I'll go, Tim, I've heard you speak a lot recently too, a couple of different briefings we've been in together. What can you sort of expand on this notion of like science communication and why it's growing ever more important?
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I mean, honestly, myself and my co-founder, Dr. Jack Norbeck, who does have a PhD and studied geothermal reservoir engineering, both benefited a ton from being part of the DOE supported, lab embedded entrepreneurship program through Activate at the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. And it's interesting. I think one of the things that they do for you kind of day one there is keep the things about you that make you a good researcher and critical thinker, but then they want to break you of a lot of your bad habits, not of your bad habits, but break you of a lot of habits that won't serve you well transitioning from academia to entrepreneurship. And it's quite a bit different. And I think you have to get outside your comfort zone, I think, to do a lot of modern innovation, particularly if you want to do it in the private sector, and really be comfortable in engaging with people, doing cold outreach to people. Networks don't get built overnight. Networks get built because you do those awkward cold emails or bump into people or follow up with interesting things. I mean, it takes time to do, and you've got to put yourself out there to do it. And one of the things that I always think about, I think pop culture really does us a disservice by creating this idea of a lone genius innovator in a research lab. And one of the coolest papers I think I've ever seen on this was one called Are Ideas Getting Harder to Find, which was published by the Stanford Economics Group last year. And they took all these things from Moore's law of semiconductors to great medical advancements and other things, and showed that to get the equivalent percentage increase in performance year over year and stay constant with that, it actually requires way more researchers than to just maintain the same place. And if you think about it, it's true. I mean, when the Wright brothers invented the modern aerospace industry, they could do it out of a bicycle shop with the equipment they had on hand and a couple of people. And you compare that to like SpaceX today doing the launches they have, where they're not taking bicycle gears and putting them onto a Starlink ship and figuring out if bicycle gears work, right? They're literally having to invent their own metals to come up to these standards, right? And so the problems we have are more complex, and as a result, our solutions to them have to be far more interdisciplinary. And if you can't communicate outside of your lane, then you're not going to be a successful innovator in the modern field. And I think that a trap that a lot of people fall into is they get to be an expert in something and they do two things. One is they only want to talk about that thing because they're an expert in it. And two is they convince themselves that it's the only thing that's important. And you can't be successful in innovation that way. And I'll give one really good example of this. I remember Doug Blankenship, who's at Sandia National Lab and with the DOE now, was leading a large interdisciplinary team to drill one of the forage potential site wells in Nevada. And I went to a talk that he gave at the DOE peer review meeting, and I came away so impressed by Doug because he was the one giving the talk about how that well went and what their go forward plan was. But every question he got asked, he said, who knows the answer to this is X person in the audience. And over the course of his 30-minute talk, probably 15 people contributed to his talk. And I realized I came away so impressed with him as a leader because it wasn't about him having all the answers, because it's impossible to do that now. It's about him having to know how to integrate all these different experts in their subdisciplines. And I talked about this before, geothermal and subsurface innovation is interdisciplinary on steroids. You can't imagine a more interdisciplinary field than this. And you have got to, it's great to be an expert in something. We have to have experts, but you have to both recognize the value in other people's expertise and get outside of your comfort zone to share ideas. And the earlier you can figure that out in your career, the better served you're going to be and the better leader you're going to be.
Yeah, actually, so that harkens back to, I think, Alex, you were talking about egos and learning where your limitations are maybe a little bit. And, I've been really fascinated. It took me a long time to really understand, Jamie, like what an incubator is. It's such a modern word that took me a long time to understand it. And now I do. And I'm just fascinated by all all the machinations and all of the things that go on in UT Austin's Geo Incubator. And I was just wondering, like, what are the things that what tools do you offer the students as they sort of try to go out and either, be involved, start their own companies, or, go out into the world and start their careers in geothermal? Like, what do you think is like the most useful thing that you offer them?
Yeah, so I think, well, it depends. It depends on what they need. So a lot of we work with students and faculty, and a lot of times people already have a general idea about what they want to do, and they need support. So they need to figure out, like, these are folks that have never started a venture, for instance, and so they have an idea, and they have a pretty good feeling for the market for it, and they've thought about these things, but they don't have any idea how to file a provisional patent and what steps they need to take at UT to do that, or they have no idea how to incorporate a company, or they have no idea. I mean, it's just these basic, there's like that checklist that you can go through about how to start a venture, which most people that have never done it, they just need some quick advice, like, throw me in the right direction, and we'll do that. Some folks have, are serial entrepreneurs, and they know all that stuff, but they would really like an introduction to venture capitalists that are interested in funding geothermal companies. And there are a lot of them now, and it's great. But if you're not in the industry and constantly listening to what's going on, you don't know who they are. And it's really overwhelming to try to go out and raise money from thousands of VCs when you don't know who to target, right? So sometimes it's advice like that. And then other times it's pitch practice. Like they have VCs lined up, but they want some advice on how they sound and what their deck looks like and if they make sense. And so, we take teams as they are and where they are, and help them along, in their process. And in a couple of occasions, we've recruited the team, helped the team, introduced the team to funders, help them get funding. So, we're involved in all the steps, and other times just where they need help. So the whole entrepreneurship thing, I'm really convinced that if every research university in the United States, particularly the ones with good drilling departments and geoscience schools, and also, some of the universities like the MITs of the world that have really great material science programs, started a geothermal entrepreneurship program of some sort to try to help faculty and students spin out companies that are specifically targeted to geothermal problems. We would have just clusters and clusters of startups doing brand new things. We just need to help people focus on how big the opportunity is and what specific problems need to be solved. Because a lot of times, people come and say, this is really exciting, but like, what do people need? How do I fit, and how can I help? So yeah.
And everybody's working with a team. Everybody needs to be well connected with a support structure, a community, to help something succeed, I suppose.
For sure.
And I was actually, there was a comment that kind of is a good segue, or a question, I should say. Are there any, would you say, because you see a lot of small companies starting up and you're in that VC world, and actually all the panelists sort of are, do you foresee, especially within oil and gas, a conflict between sharing best practices, like resource extraction approaches, and maintaining trade secrets? Is there enough room for multiple firms to succeed? I think that's an interesting question. So, and Jamie, I think I kind of want to hear from you on this, because you're trying to be.
It's a bummer. It's a bummer question, but it's a good question. So early on, less than 2 years ago, there was this flourish of engagement pretty suddenly, of a bunch of oil and gas entities in this space. And within a couple of months, it went from everybody talking to everybody really excited to nobody wanting to say anything, everybody locking down, all about intellectual property. We're not going to talk about that. Oh, by the way, we have to go through our comms people to even make comments, kind of thing. And And it's kind of sitting there like that now, though there are companies that are kind of gradually rolling out their PR and marketing points. They're officially approved marketing points about geothermal and their investments in geothermal. So, you know, over the next year, as companies roll these out and they become more public, I think everybody will start talking more freely again about what the plan is. But that's strategy. When it comes to stuff that they're doing in the field, realistically, I think outside of the professional organizations where you have engineers getting together and just kind of like, you know, having a virtual beer and talking about what their ideas are, it's, you know, even in the pivot context, I think it's going to be really hard to get panels of entities, oil and gas entities together, for instance, and be like, hey guys, let's talk about what your plans are and how to drill the next big geothermal concept, because they all consider it now their intellectual property, or they're throwing their money behind startups that have intellectual property, right? So, you know, this is kind of it's a cool thing, but it's also a bummer about having critical mass all of a sudden, where, you know, there's this flourish of innovation that nobody wants to talk about because everybody wants to, you know, take it to the bank. So anyway, I mean, but that is that, you know, free market and intellectual property. That's how you raise money. It's how you know, it's, if you come out with a new concept, it's how you become successful as a startup. So I get it. And it's essential, but it is going to make things a little bit more quiet than I think than it would be. You know, it would be better if we could all get out there with the vision, I think, first, and chat more. That would be my preference.
Yeah. I think, I think that's another pretty good segue for another audience question. And I think I'll turn this over to Alex. So we're very clear. You did not we're never interested in the oil and gas industry, but, you know, what from your background, what was the most valuable thing that you learned from an external discipline that brought you into geothermal? So let me see if I can read that question any better. Do you have any advice for people that are trying to break into geothermal from a different industry?
Meet the people of the industry. If you want to break into any industry, that's always the answer. Whether that's cold emailing, cold LinkedIn messaging. I've sent so many cold messages over the years, but it's a part of it's how you do it. You can't be afraid. Literally, if I had to boil it all down to one thing, I'd say don't be afraid. Because even if you fail, YOLO to some extent, right? You know, you're probably gonna learn something along the way. So yeah, definitely don't be afraid. And put yourself out there. And if you need advice or direction, you know, I'm happy to help. I give free time to students all the time because I want them to thrive, and I want to give some of the infrastructure for entering business and new industries to people whose daddy didn't give it to them. So if you're coming from like, you know, like a lower class, or like, you know, kind of a group of people who didn't have the world put on their plate for them, you know, I'm so here for you, and I want you to succeed. I want you all to succeed, but especially if you have no idea what you're doing, but you really want to be part of it, and there's no infrastructure in your life to help you make it happen. I'm here for you, and I'm sure that the other panelists would make the same offer. Because some of the things that Jamie mentioned, like how to start a company, you know, some people have parents who already have lawyers who can help them, right? And that kind of networking infrastructure. Most people don't. I never had that. I grew up in the country digging holes in mud. You know, I did not grow up in a family like that. So I had to build it all myself. So to the extent that, you know, if you can find people, like I can't help everyone, but I try to throw the odd starfish back in the sea when it's on the beach. But like find people who actually want to help you, and who are actually interested in you succeeding. But you know, first you have to kind of demonstrate that you actually care about something, right? Because if you're just trying to like if you have no passion and you're not interesting at all, then probably no one's going to want to help you. I don't know if that sounds harsh, but I think it's true. So yeah, I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, it's kind of, no, it totally does. It's so interesting to me because, I mean, this is just a little personal, again, personal. I was just I ended up in geothermal, but it wasn't via a concerted effort to do so. It was, I kind of stumbled here after making like small decisions that, ultimately added up to this, right? It was a series of very, very small decisions that got me here, which is, I think, which is just as valid. It's pretty common, it's just as valid, but it's not, I never networked. I never did. I still am kind of a little bit socially awkward with it. Like I understand it's like incredibly important, but I'm not, I have a lot of issues, I think, with figuring out what my value to other people is. And I think that's really important. Like having the confidence to, and identifying what you're offering somebody else. And there is always an exchange, like, what are you offering somebody and what are they getting for hanging out with you? I think there's just like any relationship, there's a nice exchange. And I'm going to go back to the audience questions. And Tim, this is a very specific one for you. I like the comment about the 10 times improvements in drilling productivity in the last decade. Building on that point, what else has changed since the GeoVision cost and performance numbers, which are also roughly from the 2011-2013 timeframe? Also, what are the biggest challenges that remain that need to be solved in bringing the cost even further closer to the $50 to $100 per megawatt hour? So yeah, I hope if you need slides and a pointer, you just let me know and I can.
It's a great question, and yeah, and I appreciate it because it actually ends up having a lot of impacts. Where the GeoVision study did a great job, I think, of using the best available information to update drilling costs. But at the end of the day, the majority of recent geothermal wells drilled in the United States were drilled between 2010 and 2011, really, when there was a mini boom in the sector. And that was an interesting time to drill. One, a lot of the technologies that we take for granted today in drilling either didn't exist or weren't performing right for the field level. And two, it was also back in a time when the rig count in the United States was close to 2,000 drilling rigs. And so people track the cost index for drilling. And because the oil and gas industry was so active back then, it left really few resources for the geothermal sector. And what was available for the geothermal sector, people had to pay through the nose for. You fast forward to today, there's actually closer to 400 drilling rigs operating in the United States now. So there's not the same stretch of equipment. You can get modern equipment for reasonable rates, and you can take advantage of all these great cost reductions as well. And we're starting to see the first times that people are applying technologies like PDC, newer PDC drilling bits and other options, a huge uptick in performance. I think one of the things that jumped off the page at me last year when Forge completed the first highly deviated well at the Utah Forge site, they did it in about half the time that was planned because they were able to take advantage of all these improvements, and the costs we looked at were that, the benchmarks from 10 years ago were quite out of date. So we're already much better from an improvement standpoint and can continue to close that gap. And that ends up having really big implications. So I can tell you something that as new data comes in that talks about how much better drilling is today, that's going to reduce the overall estimated cost for geothermal. So if you look at, NREL does a great job of doing their annual technology baseline of establishing what the costs are for geothermal. There have been large reductions in the cost of geothermal in the last couple of years as these technologies have been studied and the assumptions have gotten better for the sector. And that's really important because whenever you look at, a state like California or a state like Nevada, or an independent research group, whenever they model out what are the resources that are going to be part of the climate change future, they use those NREL annual technology baseline numbers. So the fact that they're a lot more accurate now and a lot lower as we're starting to realize these drilling innovations means that they're more realistic. And so they're modeled a lot more in this. So that I talked in my talk about this California Public Utility Commission mandate about 1,000 megawatts of geothermal coming online by 2026. A big part of the reason why they're willing to take a chance on that is they do their modeling on, what are the least cost solution to achieve the grid reliability and climate goals. And they take from these public reports that are done by NREL that show that there's actually much better advancement in the technology. And those public reports are only there because we dive into the data on drilling and get updated numbers. And so it becomes this little nugget of change where it has this kind of butterfly effect down where we improve drilling costs, we get better at studying them, they go into the NREL reports, the NREL reports go into the consultant reports that study the grid of California, and that becomes a law on how we build it. So a small change here ends up making a big difference. And the world of innovation is filled with self-fulfilling prophecies. And if we don't have a good target and a path to get there for geothermal, we're never going to attract the resources to actually drive the innovation we need. So things like this are very, very important. And the more data gets published about recent drilling efforts like Forge and some in the private sector that show that costs are way different than current assumptions because of the things I've talked about, the more it's just going to have this flywheel effect of continuing to build the momentum for the geothermal sector. So this new data is working its way into the system, and we're just only now starting to see the impacts of it. And it's a part of why there's so much momentum coming into geothermal right now. Hopefully I did that well without having to get a chalkboard out and
that was great.
Dive into the cost assumptions. Yeah.
But it makes me want to ask a question as somebody asked something similar. Like how, is the geothermal industry a big enough market if you want, if you were to specialize in geothermal as a student, is there enough of a job market to go out and get a job in geothermal right now? Or is that more of like a future, is it a geothermal future where you can get a job in geothermal?
It's a growing industry. And like I said, we're hiring people. It's still small, and there's no doubt about that. But I think things like what Assistant Secretary Bachman just said, talking about these investments in innovation and repurposing the workforce, I mean, these things are happening, and it's never as fast as we want. And we have a small base to grow from, but I can tell you, it's fun to be in an industry that's growing. I don't think we have, we can't employ everybody overnight, but if we keep innovating, if we keep attracting investment, if we keep the public support coming, it's going to be a lot of people, and there's more opportunities every day. My LinkedIn is unrecognizable from what it was 2 years ago in terms of job openings for geothermal and new papers and new studies and investment things. So it's fun. We're in the ground floor of it now, and there's a lot of building to go, and we can't employ everybody overnight. But the trajectory is just something that's just so exciting.
Yeah, and I'm going to pull on a couple of threads. You mentioned NREL reports and your LinkedIn feed blowing up with geothermal articles and what have you. Are there conferences or reports that any of you would recommend are, a must attend or a must read for somebody that wants to break into geothermal? So we've got the obvious, like the usual suspects. We've got the Geothermal Resources Council annual meeting. Actually, that's now called it's a trade organization, essentially. Maybe not. I think that has a legal definition that might not apply, but it's called Geothermal Rising now, and that takes place in the fall. That's obvious. And then we have the Stanford Geothermal Workshop, which is it's very technical, a little bit smaller, a little bit more intimate. That's held annually. Are there other conferences that you guys can recommend, and of course, papers and reports? I know a couple of you mentioned the MIT report. Now it's a little old. Is there anything else out there that they can read?
Yeah,
Alex, go.
Go
Or
ahead.
Jamie,
Ahead,
please.
Alex.
No,
Twitter.
Jamie. Oh.
Twitter is a battleground of ideas.
It's a big place. Where do you go?
Go look at my Twitter and see who I follow and see who I follow. Start there. Twitter, I learned so much from Twitter. I don't know if that sounds funny, but people are always posting interesting things. Yeah, no, Twitter is very dynamic, big place where you can learn a lot. I really mean that. Yeah, you know, my experience is that NREL and DOE reports are often totally out of date. You can learn more about what's actually going on like today on Twitter sometimes. So yeah, I would say Twitter.
Yeah, Twitter. All right, I like it. Jamie, what do you think?
Well, for
What can you
folks in
offer?
the oil and gas industry, the AAPG and the SPE are both planning geothermal technical road mapping workshops and conferences themselves, and this is going to be an increasing thing. So this will be like I imagine, you know, globally, a couple of times a year, each of these industry entities are going to start running geothermal themed products of some sort, whether it's a workshop or a conference or an exercise. Pivot, of course, is meant to be more thought leadership in geothermal. So it's not they're not technical deep dives. They're more panels discussing bleeding edge type topics and people that disagree with one another. So it's meant to be kind of getting all things on the table. For folks that are just getting in, Pivot 2020 was recorded. And you can find all the recordings on texasgeo.org. So that was 11 sessions of people arguing about the bleeding edge of geothermal, which it makes for really good TV. And it gives you a good idea of who's doing what, where, and what the ideas are. And same thing with the blog. So that's Heatbeat. That's Geo's blog. We feature.
I go there all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's more of a, let's throw this out there and, you know, let's throw this idea out there from this new voice and see what people think about it, kind of thing. And, you know, a lot of the startups that have launched out of Geo have had spots on Heatbeat. So that's another place that you can find more deep dive articles, but it's more bleeding edge than, you know, the MIT report for sure, which is old at this juncture.
It's pretty old now. When I first started in GTO, it was relatively new. I've been with GTO for 10 years. It's pretty wild.
I mean, I still find it really relevant and really inspirational, and it really is the first place anybody should go. Probably MIT report, then GeoVision, and then some of these other, you know, then go watch Pivot or read the blog, and then like after you've done all that and you have this foundation, then you can zero in some of these, you know, like Tim mentioned, the Stanford database. That's a good place that you can go and keyword search specific things. So if you're a chemical engineer interested in, you know, CO2 as a circulation fluid or something, you can keyword search that in the database and find some papers on it. And then you'll be pretty much there, and then go to Twitter. And then you can start having fights with people on Twitter because you've got, like, you know, you've got the foundational, you know, basis to fight.
Well, you start as a spectator, right, Jamie? You watch the fights unfold.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Tim, did you? I know you Jamie mentioned that you had already said the Stanford Geothermal Workshops database. We've got, you know, Alex's Twitter feed. Got to go check that out. Jamie's blog and all of the, you know, the reports that she mentioned, the conference that she mentioned. Do you have any other pro tips on that?
Yeah, I think I'll echo those again. I think there's some great technical questions coming in that I don't think are quite on topic for this that people are asking. And like Jamie said, if you just go to the Stanford Geothermal database and do a keyword search, you'll be surprised often at how exhaustively these concepts have already been studied and how much you can learn there. And that's something that's great for, you know, making yourself stand out in job interviews and everything else. So I would, you know, definitely echo that. And you know, there's also, it's an interesting time, I think, with how many things are virtual, which is, you know, not always ideal from a standpoint of you can't always, you know, grab coffee with somebody and pick their brain, but it is nice because you can participate in stuff all over the world. So there's going to be a whole sequence of things for the World Geothermal Congress that are going to be rolled out virtually over the next several months. And I mean, that's one of the things that hasn't come up yet, but want to just plug that there's, geothermal is an incredibly international industry. You know, the fastest markets for geothermal in the last few years have been Kenya, Turkey, and Indonesia. And there's all kinds of really innovative stuff happening around the world. and a lot of US innovators that are involved in those projects. So I think take advantage of this time that things are very virtual to, look not just about what's going on here, but what are the things that are coming out of, the Geothermal Center of Excellence that's located in Kenya, or the different workshops that are happening in Indonesia, where there's a lot of growth. So, keep looking at those things. It's a very international industry, which is one of the things that makes geothermal quite fun to work in.
Yeah, I think that that's a really wonderful note to end on. We're almost 15 minutes over, but we did get a late start. But I just want to be respectful for everybody's time because everybody is so busy. I'll just say that, going back to what all the panelists have said, this is a growing community. All walks of life are welcome. So many disciplines are represented in all the work that geothermal does. And I think that it makes it really unique in that regard. And I think geothermal is really going places. It's never been, like I just said, I've been with GTO for a really long time, and I've never felt this level of buzz about geothermal. It's a really exciting time. And there are so many wonderful people working in the field that are interested in helping or working with students, Jamie and Tim and Alex, just such wonderful resources. And they're not alone. I mean, the whole industry is just filled with people like this. And so I encourage everybody in attendance today, reach out to folks, do the cold emailing, or send, go to conferences, bring a card, do some research on your own time. And, you're just I think it's such a energetic environment. There's always going to be something new. And it's just a wonderful environment of opportunities. So I think with that, we'll shut it down for the day. I think, though, I would like to, again, apologize for the delay and the technical difficulties and all these things. I think we're all sort of used to it now. You would think that we would have hacked this by this point, but there always are going to be technical difficulties. So I wanted to say thank you, Tim, thank you, Jamie, and thank you, Alex, and thank you all of the support staff at NREL that made this happen. I think, and of course, all of the wonderful attendees. You guys have really hung in there for a long time today and have asked some wonderful questions. So thank you as well. Have a good rest of your Wednesday.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks. It's been awesome.
Thank you.
Bye, Jamie.
Bye,
Yeah,
everybody.
bye.